Who do you think I should ask next? Who's the one of the other persons that I should interview?
So if we talk about agile industry, I would also love to hear um, Esther Derby. What does she think?
Hi. Today I'm talking with Esther Derby. Esther explains how studying art history made her a better programming, how she experimented with working in a bookstore and what she learned from it. The impact that COVID had both on her personal and work life. Throughout this conversation with Esther, integrity and its importance for her was always present. I'm Yves Hanul from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it. Hello, and hello, everyone who's listening, and hello, Esther.
Hi.
And well, usually I ask people a little bit of where they are and what time it is. And on my side, it's 15 or 14 minutes after 5 in the evening. What time zone are you, Esther? In?
I'm in U.S. Central, so it's 10:15, and I live in Duluth, Minnesota, which is far northern
I'll
Minnesota.
try to show it. So I'm here in Belgium, and if Google helps out, it should show us a little bit what's the traveling that we're doing, and it goes to Minnesota. If I kind of correct where you are, that's not that far from Lake Superior or something.
I'm actually right on the tip of Lake Superior, so that's a little west of where I am.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to help stalkers to find the exact location, of course.
Okay, yeah, we won't show them the satellite view of my house.
Exactly, that's not the goal.
I moved here 9 years ago, and I didn't realize at the time that this little town in the middle of the continent is actually a seaport. It's the 17th busiest seaport in the United States, and we get ocean-going ships here. So they come in through the canals and St. Lawrence Seaway, and then through the lakes. And
wow! So
yeah,
when I hear lake, I think, okay, this is a small part, but it's actually, if you have seaports, it's actually
it's
even complete.
Depending on whether you're looking at depth or surface area, it's the first or second biggest lake in the world, freshwater.
Wow!
Yeah, so it's a big lake.
So we already jumped right into a lot of interesting things to learn. So, but for the people who don't know you, the 2 or 3 people around the world that don't know you, Esther, just say a little bit, who are you and what do you want people, well, just a little bit, who are you?
Yeah, well, I started my professional career as a programmer. So I have that in my background, and I've, done testing because we used to do our own testing. And I became a dev manager and then an internal consultant. And in 1997, I walked away from the corporate world and started my own little company. And so I have worked for myself since 1997.
Wow.
And what I really care about, and why I am still doing the work I do, is I really care about creating a more humane workplace. And that's what keeps me going. And I suspect it won't come about in my lifetime, but I'm going to do the work wherever I can to create more humane workplaces.
Yeah, and wherever you can, you did that with lots of books and workshops and podcasts and all the other things where people might know you from.
Yeah.
Okay, let's jump right into that very first question. That what is something people usually don't know about you, but has influenced you in who you are?
So many things. I don't have a computer science degree. I have an art history degree and a leadership degree. So my undergraduate was in art history, which some people would think, what does that have to do with programming? Uh, it has a lot to do with recognizing patterns, recognizing relationships, spatial relationships, putting things in context. Because art history, you're always looking at the object, but you're also looking at the historical period, the philosophies that were prevalent at the time, what was going on in politically at the time. So you're always putting stuff in context. And I think that influences the way I approach things.
I can definitely see that as a programmer, that sometimes is important when we say, oh, why is it somebody created that way? Well, there may be a reason in the past. And same thing, I think, for policies. If you look at policies inside companies, there might be policies that were there that needed at some point, but are no longer needed. And when you can look at that, that's the kind of thing that
I think often we go into organizations with this sort of temporal blindness or blindness as to time. But what happened before is really important. The past is always in the present in some way. The seeds of the structures we have now reflect where we came from. So I think that's an important thing that informs the way I think about things, the way I look at the world, all those things. So yay, art history.
Yeah, I really like that, because typically as a consultant, we don't always think about time in the sense about the past things. And I think it's like, I really like that you bring it in, because as a consultant, having, how would I say it, respect for what happened in the past might help you to help people to go to the future in a sense.
Enormously, yeah.
Yeah, that's a very nice way of, and I can definitely see how that influences you on how you look at things and how it helps you. That's a very nice thing, and I don't think I've heard similar things here, so that's very nice as a way to make people think, or at least to make me think about some of these things. So thank you for sharing this. Let's move to that second question. If you had not been doing what you've been doing now, is there anything that you consider yourself seeing, or that you were destined to become at some point?
Well, I don't know about destined. I think I probably would have written in some way or another, whether I had ended up in this field or not. But at one time in my life, because I loved books and reading so very much, my dream was to own a bookstore. And I see you like books too. I can see that looking at your background. So I decided to do an experiment, and I quit my programming job, and I went to work in a bookstore. And it was horrible. Oh, it was awful. My fantasies were not fulfilled. I was not talking about what people had been reading lately, or discussing literature or favorite authors. I was helping people find the latest Danielle Steele novel for their beach reading. So it did not fulfill my fantasies. And I went back to my programming job. I'm very glad I did, because, bookstores are, it was kind of like the wave was not quite ending when I was having that fantasy. But
definitely it went down since then, I assume.
Yes, definitely, especially independent bookstores. But it taught me about experimenting, and it taught me about how can we test out this idea without investing too much time and money, and making an irreversible decision. So I learned way back then that test it out. Don't bet the farm. That's an American expression, bet the farm. I don't know. Does they have a similar one in Dutch?
I'm not sure. I do understand it, but basically it means don't bet your whole future on it, right?
Yeah. Don't put all your money and your whole future into something that hasn't been tried. So I think that was a useful thing to do. I mean,
so in that sense, do I understand? So you went working in a bookstore. You didn't try to create your own bookstore and put all your money in that. So that's in that sense, it was an experiment.
Right. I mean, it wasn't like, I often tell people to do experiments where you can get data in a few, a few hours or a few days. That one, I actually worked there for a few months to see what it was going to be like. But, the data was in pretty soon. It's not my fantasy. So
So,
the other thing it taught me was, you have to look at not just what you dream something is, but try to get data about something. Not just what you think it's like, get the data.
so if you could have done during your programming a weekend job at the bookstore, that would have probably given you the same data without stopping your other
Yeah,
job or something like that.
potentially.
So that where now it was a bigger investment or a bigger
Yeah.
experiment in a sense.
Although as working there full time, see, if I had just been a part-time employee working on the weekend, I probably would have experienced the retail end of it, but not necessarily the operational end of it. And being there full time, I got to experience the operational end of it. So
So
I might
more
have been
data.
able to, I might have been able to get the data working retail. Although I had already worked retail when I was a high school student. That was one of my first job, was being in retail at Palmer Ice Department Store in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't have learned something new or less new at that time. So
Yeah.
in a sense, it was a
Yeah.
good experiment for you to do.
Yeah.
I really like that because indeed it's you can link it immediately to a lot of the other things that you do, and it
Mhm.
shows also that even it's an experiment. Maybe it wasn't the best experiment, or it wasn't as, I don't know, scientific as you would do it now, but you learned still a lot of things in a rather
Well, I think it
limited
was
amount of time.
I think it was an excellent experiment in that it gave me the information to make a decision, and I learned something from it. Maybe I
And
could have
and
crafted it more finely, knowing what I know now, but knowing what I knew then, I think it was a decent experiment.
and in that sense, it helped you to be happy again with your programming job. If you would not have quit it, you probably would have been dreaming for it and fantasizing a lot longer.
Yeah, probably so. So,
So yeah,
yeah.
these are the good kind of experiments indeed, to try out stuff. And yeah, but it's I see people dreaming for the whole life about, I should have done this, and maybe, and well, you did it and you learned
Mhm.
something, and
Yeah.
okay, you said, okay, that's not for me.
Back to
Let's move on to
programming.
that next thing. What is currently your biggest or the biggest challenge that you want to share that
The
you're
biggest
working on?
challenge that I want to share. People often ask me, how can you stand to work with big organizations? They're so slow to change.
Mhm.
So I think patience is in some ways a challenge, and in many ways a virtue. And the things I want to change are not going to change immediately. I can see like tiny little changes. I can see individual and team level changes, but patience, just taking a long view. I mean, I don't know if that's a challenge at this point. I mean, it's something I have learned to do. So maybe that's not a challenge. My biggest challenge right now is dealing with a garden. That's my biggest challenge.
Mm,
So
wow.
I,
Okay.
I have sole responsibility for this rather enormous vegetable garden this year, and I've never really gardened. So that's a huge challenge. And it takes attention every single day. You have
Like
to,
teams,
yeah,
the
like
garden.
teams. Like teams, like people, you have to attend to it every day. And I learned that you have to prune tomatoes. I learned that by not pruning tomatoes, and now I have a tomato thicket. So
So and I really like it because you bring it on. When we purchased our domain some years ago, we also had a garden a little bit bigger than we thought we wanted, but we thought, oh, that's nice. And until the moment you realize, okay, that means you have to spend in that much time to keep it working in a sense, and that's I underestimated that work at least.
Yeah.
In
Well,
my case, my partner is taking care of most of it, but still, I've underestimated a lot of that work
yeah.
that it
Well, and
means.
it gives me great appreciation for the people who do grow food. It's not just, you stick some plants in the ground and then magic happens. It actually is a lot of work. And I think some of it I'm going to replant in perennial flowers. So
To say, okay, maybe let's have less of our own vegetables or my own vegetables because of
yeah,
time
well,
limits.
I mean, and you can also only eat so much, and there's only so much you can put in the freezer. So
But
yeah,
well, you could start selling, but then you're into a completely different business that takes another time of you that you probably don't want to spend time on.
yeah, yeah. I mean, doing production at the level to do farmers market is not what I
Your goal.
aspire to.
I can definitely see that. I want to go to that next question, which is I know you as a person that feel very driven because you're passionate about, like you say, you want to make that world a better place, and
Mhm.
if that's the kind of the sentence that to rephrase what you said earlier. But do you have any idea where your passion, where your drive is coming from?
Yeah, so I want to make work more humane. I think that is what keeps me doing the work. Um, I think it comes from a number of places. One is just a basic sense of fairness. I've always, since I was a small child, I had this, sense of fairness, and the sense of fairness you have as a child is different than the more nuanced understanding that you gain when you become an adult. But I think that in some ways is in there. I also experienced and witnessed the dehumanization, in some cases, the abuse that people receive in corporate situations, in work situations, where people's humanity is not taken into account, it's not respected, where the fact that people have a whole context outside of their job is not respected. Um, where power is used in a way that is, quite disrespectful and dehumanizing. So I have seen and experienced that, and I don't think it has to be that way. I don't. I believe and I have seen that there are better ways to create an environment where people can do excellent work other than relying on, um, you know, certain kinds of power and certain ideas about um, how people are motivated.
And that's, if I understand correctly, I don't know how much you want to talk about it, but that's probably what triggered you also to say, I'm going to go independent and leave that world and then try from there to change it, or is that
Well, yeah,
not related?
that certainly plays into it. I mean, a big part of it. Um, I was in an internal consulting role when I left, and I I was being asked to do things that it was obvious were not going to work, were not going to solve the problems or make the situations any better. Um, and I didn't want to waste my time doing, stupid stuff that wasn't going to work. If I figured if I was going to make mistakes, I at least wanted them to be my own mistakes on my own terms, so I could and be able to learn from them.
Yeah, if you already know it's not going to work and then it doesn't work, then you don't learn anything from it,
Yeah,
and why do
yeah,
it in a sense?
yeah. And
Okay.
part of what I was being asked to do was institute rigorous project management and the rigorous use of project workbench and such like tools for project planning to make the project come in on time, which with large software projects, that's not going to work. So it was,
No.
it's quite obvious that the solution they were applying to the problem was came from a paradigm that was not a match for the problem. And I didn't,
And you already knew at that time, because that's
yeah,
what, like you said, 97. So
yeah,
that's a long time ago
yeah.
already. But even there, I think even in the 90s, a lot of these things were already becoming clear that there were better ways of solving these kind of problems.
To some people there were. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's and that's basically what you've done ever since. So in that sense,
Mhm.
you've proven the world, or you've proven the persons that you were working with before, that there could be made a living with doing it in a better way, even if it's just for yourself, of course.
Yeah, I don't know that I had anything to prove to them. I doubt any. I doubt many of them are aware
Or
of.
maybe they don't care, but yeah, I mean, for yourself, you knew that
Yeah,
there were better ways, and
yeah,
maybe for yourself prove it, and
yeah,
apparently it's kind of working.
yeah.
It
It's
was a better experiment than the library in a sense.
yeah, yeah. The I, somewhere sometimes somebody told me that the average independent business is just they manage consulting business manages to stay in business for 3 years. And so I'm on how many 97 to now. I don't know. I can't do math and arithmetic in public. I'd have to get out my calculator.
25, something like that. So
Yeah,
that's it's time to celebrate already. So
it could be. It's my silver anniversary. So, and you've been
so
in business as an independent for a long time too.
yes, about the same time. I
Yeah,
98 officially started, and then
yeah.
99 corporation and something like that. Yeah, and similar kind of things. But I still, well, I don't know when you started stopped as a developer, but I was still a developer at that
Mm,
time. But did it basically for similar kind of reasons,
mhm.
because in my time, I don't want to go too much into detail, but I was asked, well, basically I couldn't learn and as much as I wanted, and so my main reason was to follow any kind of courses that I wanted to follow, and being an independent, you can select any kind of courses you wanted.
Yep.
I know, for example, you just launched, I think last week or something. I saw a mail about a new version of PSL, the training that you're doing with
Mhm.
Don Gray.
Don Gray, Don Gray.
And I remember that I once told about I've loved the version that I went to when I was still with Jerry Weinberg, and I once told a boss from a company. He was asking what could be a good course for this certain person, and I told him, I was like, yeah, but that's maybe a full week learning about leadership. Is like, well, yeah, exactly. This is why I became independent.
Yeah. Well,
It's
it's it's interesting because Jerry isn't around anymore, but the arc of the course is still exactly the same. Of course, Don and I have put our own kind of personalities into it, but it's really quite similar to what it used to be. It's
Well,
interesting.
I remember afterwards. I know there was some discussions, and I know that I said, well, for me, I believe in the course as the way it's set up. That even if Jerry is no longer around, I still believe it. I still advise it to many people because
Oh, that's great.
it's for me one of, well, I'm not going to say it's the best, but it's definitely my top five of
Oh,
courses that
great.
I've been to, and others are year-long courses of 2 years. So if a
Yeah.
1 week is there together with it, it's definitely is one of the things I still advise people. And yeah, and indeed, if it's just 1 week compared to a 2 year course, it's kind of strange that people say let's not let people go there. But okay, that's
Yeah.
more
And
their loss than anything else.
and obviously you're not going to learn everything about leadership in you know 5.5 days, but it in my experience, people have insights in this workshop that they are not likely to get other places, and they're different for every person, right?
And it from what I hear to the people that I was within the course, and some others I've talked afterwards, is that there is definitely some learning that is still going on
Mhm.
afterwards. There are still things that
Mhm.
I know that I should actually go look back at my notes again, because I try to look back at it every year or something like that, and I still learn some of the things. I might not agree with everything that's in there, but yeah, that's okay as well. Um, it's Okay, let's move to that next question. And what do you consider your biggest achievement? And this is basically your moment to brag. I know that's
Well,
hard for a lot of people, so I don't know how hard it is for you.
I come from a heritage, and I come from a part of the country where you just don't brag. You just don't. It's it's being humble is the thing. So when I need someone to write a resume that talks about everything I do, or a blurb, I get someone else to do it for me. What is my biggest accomplishment? I feel like I have managed to live with not perfect, but pretty dang good integrity for much of my life. I think that's a big accomplishment.
That is indeed
Uh,
a big accomplishment because that is definitely hard.
yeah,
It looks easy when you're a teenager because you talked earlier about what
yeah,
you want to. If you're
yeah,
young, then it's like, yeah, this is. But then the older we get, it's harder.
yeah. The more responsibilities you have, so I think that's an accomplishment. Um, yeah, I've created the life I want. I have always thought more about what do I want my life to be like, rather than what do I want to do, or what achievement do I want to have, what do I want my life to be like, and I think I've pretty much accomplished that. And now I'm working on the next kind of chapter of what I want my life to be like.
I think we're all, of course, and in a sense that, well, maybe if just sideways a little bit, did COVID in a sense have an impact on you on that sense in the fact that thinking about that chapters?
Um, well, of course. I mean, I had been traveling, on the average 20 weeks out of a year for, I don't know, 15 years at least. And I
Mm.
had been saying for a while that I wanted to travel less. I didn't expect it to happen the way it did, but it was, I had not literally not been in my own house for a period of longer than several weeks in a row for 15 years. So here I was at home seeing all of every season, and just so that was really an interesting experience. Just what is it like not to travel? What is it like not to get on a plane? What do I do with myself? I had to completely rethink how I was doing business, because I used to go on planes and go do stuff with people and do in-person workshops. So all of my face-to-face business canceled. So I had to
Like for
rethink.
everyone.
Yeah, I'm not the only one who had that happen, obviously. So I had to rethink all of that stuff. And like many people, it put some strains on relationships. And so my relationship status changed.
Wow. Okay,
Yeah.
I
So
didn't know that.
I ended up getting a divorce.
That's
And
heavy.
yeah. And I feel happier than I have in years. So, um, things work until they don't. And, I think there were probably a lot of COVID divorces.
Yeah, definitely. It's yeah. We just built a new house literally a year before COVID, or we moved into a new house, so we
Mhm.
were having a better situation. But I definitely agree that there's a lot of tension than being around all the time. Having, in our case, the children being here all the time, so never away. So there was a lot harder for we time in a sense that
Sure.
we needed
Sure.
to look for. And I'm still looking forward to the first moment that we can really say, okay, now everybody is back to the normal situation, because
Yeah.
we definitely feel that. I recognize that, and I recognize what you say about lots of relationship. I see it around me with a lot of people. It puts a lot of stress, and sometimes it just shows what there was already or what there
Sure.
wasn't already
Sure.
before. Um, But and in
Yeah.
that sense, it might be good if things if in the end you say, well, I like that you say you ended up being happier than before, so
Yeah.
that's the good news. But I can definitely see that it makes it a lot harder for dealing with a lot of these things. So
Well, I
that's
have the whole garden to take care of, and the whole house, and all the snow. I hire people to shovel the snow.
but at the same time, there is also no one in your way when you want to do or leaving whatever clothes or whatever in the house at the moment that you're not expecting it.
Yeah,
Whatever. So,
but I don't do that.
no, okay, but not you. But I mean, there's no one else where you can get feel bad about things that happen differently. So
Yeah.
which
Well, I
happens
mean,
when you're
and
living in a house of children. That's why I'm
yeah, oh
thinking.
God, I'm sure. Yeah. But I mean, there are downsides to it, I mean, but I'm I'm content. I'm content.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
That's good to know. So I want to move to that next tip. And this is new. This was not in the book version, but do you have any
Um,
personal agility tip to share? Is there anything specialty that you do that you think is important to share for people?
what do you mean by personal agility?
Well, what I on purpose didn't want to say too much about it, but what I notice is that most agilists have some kind of ways on how they organize their life in a kind of way. It could be personal Kanban, it could be anything. And I'm asking that
Mm,
what are things that help you to do the work that you want to do in typically in some kind of agile way, or that you learn from working in an agile way.
Um, well, responding to change. We're sticking with the plan. In ways big and small. Like I just talked about one thing where there was a sort of implicit plan about this was how life was going to unfold, and that I had to adjust to that, and look for the possibilities. I think having less travel time has also um, made me much more aware of taking advantage of opportunities that happen to be in front of me, even if they are not necessarily what was, the plan. So the
Mm.
whole adapting to what is rather than following a plan is, I think, become far more salient for me. Although, I still have sort of a plan, and I'm, not necessarily throwing that away, but I'm certainly um, adjusting to what is going on and taking advantage of that.
In a sense that when you had planes already scheduled and all the kind of things, that it was harder to change the plan than it's now. Is that the way I
Well,
should interpret it, or?
I think that's a small part of it. The other part is just being aware of what is and responding to that versus what you thought was going to happen.
Right, because
Yeah,
indeed, yes, sometimes we think we have our own fantasy of
yeah,
what is, and
yeah.
seeing it like it's really is might be an important part. Um, and I'm kind of hearing that basically also because you're more at home, because you're more at it makes you look more at the situation to understand it really like it is. That's part of what I'm hearing.
Well, certainly my local surroundings. I'm much more woven into the fabric of my neighborhood and my
Mm.
community than I was before the pandemic.
Yeah, because when you, like you said, you were never
I
multiple
wasn't
months at
around that
home at
much.
yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah, so you were basically you were here but you were not there, or you were there but you were not there. So in a sense, that's
Yeah.
and now you're much more. So that's definitely has a huge impact
Yeah.
on how we look at things. I want to move into something oh no, that's not the one. What we talked briefly about it, about remote working. So before you were doing most of it in person, like you said, is there anything that you learned about remote working that you want to share with people that you thought, okay, this is interesting for people to learn and to that you want to share?
Hmm. Well, I'm thinking about how I want to say this. Well, so I think I'll just say it, which is um, one of the things that has been prevalent during this big experiment in remote work has been surveillance software. And a lot of companies are installing surveillance software to make sure that people are working hard,
Which
and
is, yeah, which comes back to your big theme about trusting people
yeah,
and
right,
everything
right.
around that.
And it has devastating consequences on morale, on stress, on productivity, on creativity, because these tracking systems are not. They're intrusive. It's intrusive monitoring, which most people deeply resent. Um, it's stressful. They're not good at tracking thinking work or interpersonal work. Uh, and yet it is deeply ingrained in the mental model of how people are motivated and how people work. So there are a lot of people who are really bought into it. So that this whole remote thing has made that really evident in ways that the sort of monitoring that we used to have, in face-to-face situations, it was annoying and it was obtrusive, but this automation of tracking people, tracking what their eye movements and snapping photos of them and keyboard strokes um, has really laid that bare and laid the costs
Wow.
bare.
I wasn't even aware that it happened at that level. I knew about
Yeah.
some of that software for students about exams and stuff like that. But even there, I heard so many stories of things that basically didn't work. And for the people who were trying to do a good job, that they were, well, got false reports in many
Yeah.
different ways.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, and I'm not well. First of all, the software isn't doing the job like it should do. But on the other hand, I don't even want them to do it the job they
Yeah.
want to do
It's
because,
it's
like
deeply
you say,
dehumanizing and deeply disrespectful.
and like you say, half of the work, and especially programming, but also a lot of other work, is about thinking. And yeah, it's not about how fast we can type in code. It's about,
Right.
yeah, how good we can think about what's the correct code.
Yeah.
Um,
I read an article where there were they applied this kind of software to therapists. So what does a therapist do? They don't type. They interact with other humans, but they weren't getting credit for the time they spent in therapy sessions because it wasn't trackable. So
which is basically the
utterly
basic most
stupid. Yeah.
important. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they got tracked at the moment that they wrote reports about their patients,
Right.
basically something like that, and
Yeah.
which is also good because it might be good if they record something to help them later on, but it's not the real work. The real work is in talking to the patients in a sense. Huh?
Yeah.
So
So, I mean, that's just one egregious example. There's tons of them, but so,
that's definitely a good thing a good thing to talk about and to make people aware that this kind of software doesn't help anyone. Basically, it comes back to what you said earlier about management and treating people humane and working, yeah, trusting people that things are happening in a good way.
yeah, well, it's measuring the stuff that's easy to measure rather than the stuff that's important. And the managers who fall for that, and a lot of them do, oh, I can see who's who's most productive. It's like you can see who's doing the most of this. That doesn't equate to any sort of outcome. So I think it's, maybe it's the people who are not so great at managing knowledge work who like it. I don't know.
or who never done any knowledge work and don't understand what it means. So that's
And they
yeah.
walk into this system of management, which is really based on, hierarchical thinking and belief that people, not them, of course, but those people lower in the hierarchy won't work unless we push them.
Which is interesting because if you would then would apply that same software to the management, how would you deal with that? Because basically, there's that yeah, there is nothing that they do that is trackable in these systems, probably,
Well,
or
you could
I don't
track
know.
them entering stuff into the HR system, or you can track them entering, time, or you can track,
Yeah.
scheduling meetings. But all of that stuff is, maybe some of it needs to be done. But yeah, so it's very hierarchical and imposition of, power.
Yeah, and it's yeah. Think we both agree at that level. That's not the kind of way we hope leadership will from the future will work.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was kind of hoping that thanks to what we see, because I've seen a lot of teams that were way more productive when at home. Because well, in Belgium, sometimes we have an hour of traffic in the morning, an hour of traffic in the evening. Even
Mhm.
if you just take half an hour for ourselves, half an hour for the company, that's already an hour more work and an hour more for ourselves. So
Right.
that can definitely bring in productivity, both in the morning for myself, for my family, and for the company if I want. So that could bring in lots of value.
Mhm.
The fact that we're not in traffic for an hour also means that we're well. I'm at least I'm more and I have more energy when I start up in the morning. So that definitely brings value for everyone. But of course, it's not trackable or less in a sense if they're in their systems.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Not
that's
everything that can be counted counts.
counts exactly. That's I think we agree on that, and we can probably talk for hours about these
Yeah.
kind of things. Let's move to that next part. What's a book that you currently read or a book that you want to talk about?
I just finished reading a book called This Chair Rocks. And it's about ageism and about
Mm,
how we internalize it and how it is expressed in society. So it was really interesting in a lot of ways. And one of the things that I found particularly interesting about it is that many people have this vision of older people as kind of decrepit and miserable, and they have these kind of miserable small lives, and that's actually not true. That in general, olders report being happier and more satisfied with their lives than people at other
mm.
times, people in other age groups. So I thought that was super interesting. So I have something to look forward to. Yay. Um,
Well, I wouldn't consider yourself old, but yeah, I can definitely see we're not 20 year anymore. So
no, I'm
we're
not
more
that
into
anymore.
the I think both of us were already past halfway of our life, probably,
Yeah, probably.
depending on we are. And yeah, if I just well, the one of the people I've interviewed, Linda Rising, is probably one of the most oldest people in our community, and definitely is not the way the typically described older as grumpy. Definitely not. Still
Yeah,
enjoying her life and
yeah,
learning a lot of new stuff and working and actually being in a way much progressive or much learning much more than sometimes 20 years old. So I definitely agree that it's not just age that makes people behave in a certain way or think in a
yeah,
certain way.
yeah. But
Um,
it's very it's ageism is quite prevalent. I remember being on a some panel about remote work at the beginning of the pandemic, and someone actually said, well, older people struggle with technology. And there are two of us who are would have been considered older people on the panel, and we're both, check your ageism. So and I mean, it is true, I can't do video editing as quickly as my uh great nephews and nieces, but it's a matter of practice and a matter of how I
Priorities, I
communicate,
think.
priorities, and how I choose to communicate. I mean, if I were doing a lot of TikTok videos, I'd probably be good at it, but I'm not.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely something. There are people who are yeah, that might be in the older age that are not interested in learning. And if I look at my mother, she might not know TikTok, although I think from my daughter and others, she might actually know TikTok, but she might be less interested in creating her own TikTok videos.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean that everyone doesn't need doesn't know, and that there are no older people understanding some technologies. I know that my mother, when she retired, that actually she was interested in learning Office at that time, and she actually after she finished working, actually worked even more on, or actually no, it was the year before she retired that she said, okay, I have this course that I give at school, and before I stop, I want to make sure that everything I have in my course is completely digitized in Word, so that the person who's coming next to me has it. Because before she worked on paper, and for her it worked, and she said, okay, I'll start learning Office to make sure that everything is digitalized, that it's
Mhm.
a digital version
Nice.
in a word processor. And she learned that just before retiring.
Mm.
Where a lot of people think, oh no, that's not what well, yes, indeed. And she's not the only one. I think you have a, yeah, like you say, there's a lot more people there, and they have time, so they basically they take their own, yeah, their own priorities. What do we want to learn? Yeah, that's definitely, it's and like you say, well, ageism, I see a lot of isms in our world that we're still struggling. Sexism, racism, ageism. I think there's a lot of
Mhm.
isms that people like to see the world in a certain view. And as long as they're not there, as long as they're young or they're male or they're whatever, they don't see they don't see the other part of the world, and they have some lots of yeah, I think there's definitely a lot that we can learn. So a good thing. I'll definitely add the book to the show notes that people can
Yeah,
learn, because it looks like it's one of the books. It's another book on my pile that I want to read and I want
yeah,
to learn from. Definitely.
yeah.
I want to move.
A younger friend recommended it to me, and I was really happy I read it.
So well, then I'll well, again, like I said, I'm definitely interested in having it on my pile. I want to move to that next question. That for me is one of the most interesting one. What's a question that I didn't ask that you think I should actually ask you?
Oh,
And
I don't know. Um, what is a question you should have asked? I'm not coming up with anything. I think you've asked some interesting questions, and they've been fun to answer and talk with you about. What should you have asked? I don't know.
anything else you want to share or you want to talk about that we didn't talk about?
Um, well, one thing that I think is an interesting topic, given that this is how many years since you did the first Who is Agile?
It was in. I started in 2010, so 12 years ago.
So 12 years. So we're what, 20 some years into the Agile movement, and
Mhm.
there are no more early adopters. So I think we have to
Mhm.
think about that when we work with companies who are now looking into agility. Um, they have different motivations, not better or worse, just different. Um, there's a whole institutional structure that has grown up around Agile that I think we need to pay attention to. And we need to be looking at what's the new thing, right? Not just, Agile methods, trying to inculcate them into some company, but what is the next thing we can do to make software more effective and more humane?
So that's indeed a very interesting question. And do you have any ideas? Do you have anything there that you say which is interesting things to look at, if you put it that way?
Um, well, the things I'm most interested in are the things we can do around teams and leadership and really creating organizations that don't rely on a hierarchical view of people. Hierarchy is an okay organizing principle, right? It's a way to reduce cognitive load. And it's, from that standpoint, I don't have any big argument about it. What I have an issue with is the very hierarchical view of people. Like people up here are better than people,
the kind of patronizing thing.
Yeah, that sort of thing. So if we can find ways to work that don't rely on a hierarchical view of people, a hierarchy of goodness of people, I think we will find better results.
And is it always based on what people feel at the top? I'm asking because I recently had a discussion also with at a company where I felt like that person felt like, oh, you're kind of patronizing, or there is a manager who's kind of patronizing, where I had the feeling that that manager, that leader, was not, or less at least, and that the people below, to put it that way, and in a hierarchical sense, felt it. Do you have anything there? Do you have anything that you can see, or tips for people to?
Well,
Yeah,
I think sometimes it gets projected onto people, sometimes, but I think it's also an artifact of that the subtle messages we get when we are in that kind of hierarchy. And, even if it's just the organizing structure to some extent, where you feel different depending on where you are in that hierarchy. Barry Oshry's done some interesting writing about that. So yeah, separating the organizing principle from the way we view the value of humans. But I think once you walk into that structure where both of those are present, you take on some of the values of that, and there is a different felt feeling depending on where you sit in the hierarchy.
yeah, and I think it's that this is why I'm asking, because I felt in that discussion that people sometimes feel certain values where it isn't always intended like that,
Sure.
and especially if it's around feedback, that people give feedback around, yeah, if we want to improve things, that there's something like, oh, but you feel better than me. No, it's just okay, trying to work out how we can improve ourselves and find ways to do that. But there's definitely a lot of tension around a lot of that, and it's
well, I mean,
not always easy.
there are different sorts of power available to people. If you're just looking at hierarchy as an organizing principle, there are generally different types of power allocated to people at different levels in the hierarchy. And how those get used and how those get acknowledged has a big effect on people. And that may be at play in the situation you were just talking about. I mean, managers are delegated certain types of power, some of which they have to use, and in some cases they can use many sorts of power, but they often choose to use positional power or reward power versus referent power or network power, or some of those exercises that of power that tend to gain buy-in and engagement versus compliance. So that over-reliance on that kind of power can automatically lead to that sort of perception that you're lording this over me, which is a very old word, but it comes from a very hierarchical view of the world.
Well, in the particular case, it was really about people at the same level in the team, but somehow one felt that the other was taking a higher stance. But okay, I don't want to go too much into the detail of a specific
status
situation.
and power in organizations are super
Exactly.
interesting.
It's but it's always interesting to see how things are playing out and what's happening. I want to move to the next question about who do you think I should ask next? Is there a person or a list of people that you think I should invite next?
Well, I must confess, I haven't recently looked at the list of people you have already invited. So I may be naming some people you've already talked to. Kat Swetel.
She's on my list and she's been
Yeah.
invited already, but she's definitely, I haven't interviewed her yet, so
Yeah.
definitely another request for Kat, I would say.
Yes. Jessica Kerr.
That's a good idea. I didn't have her on my. I didn't have invited her yet, so that's
Yeah,
that's a
and
good idea.
Beth Andres-Beck.
Okay, I don't know her, so that's definitely
She's
so 3 women that are.
yes.
Wait, let's say a little bit more.
So Beth Beck, she goes by
Mhm.
Beth Andres-Beck, but the name might give you a clue.
Is that related to Kent?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, that's because I've been asking Kent but he for the book originally, but he declined at that moment. But that's even more interesting. A person that might be influenced. And yeah, okay, I'll see later on how I can.
Yeah.
Definitely good ideas. Thank you very much.
One more, if I can add. Faye Thompson.
Yes, I didn't think about her. I don't even I know her, but I don't think she's
Yeah.
on my list. So that's a good. Well, the list is getting longer and longer. We're more than 300 at this moment, and I if I just publish one a week, then I'm already gone for 6 months, for 6 years, which I probably won't do. So it's basically based on the people who invited to see where I can go next.
Yeah. Well, I want to bump those up on your list. Put those higher.
Exactly. That's what I'm looking for people inviting. That's because for me it's impossible to select among all these
Sure.
wonderful people. So thank you very much. Now, if people want to get in contact with you, what would be a good way to reach out to you?
Well, they can email me, esther@estherderby.com. They can follow me on Twitter at Esther Derby.
I think that's this one.
Yep, that's me. I put out an occasional newsletter. It used to be monthly. Now it's not quite so monthly, but it might get back to being monthly. So that's a way to find out what I'm up to. Like if you want to join one of my classes, like PSL, which we have a class coming up in October. If you want to join.
And I think if they want to join the mailing list, they can find it on your website,
Yep.
I assume.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, it's been wonderful. We've
Yeah.
been talking for almost an hour, I think, just a little bit less than it. And it's like we said earlier on, we can talk for hours and days. But I'm glad that we took again some time to share stories and to learn. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful, just as always. And I do hope that there will come a time that we meet again in person when everything is over. At this point, I'm using this to get connected to my people, to the people I know internationally, because I don't want to go to other countries right now.
Sure.
At this point, for obvious reasons, I would say. But I'm sure that there will come a time where we'll do that again.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Who's Agile, where the stories of agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other agilists.